We're here today with Eric Andersen. Thanks so much for taking the time to chat with us today.
It's my pleasure.
So I wanted to start a little by asking you, we're in a time of such change and transformation. I was hoping you could tell me a little bit about the leadership team at Aon's sort of aims and visions for the coming years.
So I would say our view around the firm is really trying to create a world-class, client advisory firm, really trying to add value, relevance to what the client is doing in their business. We've historically been involved in the subject matter of risk, which as you sit here today and you think about the world and where we are and where the next 10 years are going, really critical topics for all of our clients. And so a lot of what we've been doing inside the firm is working on positioning how we best get that subject matter excellence into the hands of our clients in a way with which they want to digest it and use it.
We were chatting about this beforehand as well, but the whole area of the future of work, I know it's somewhere that Aon has been putting a lot of thought and work in sort of transforming how you deal with your people. Can you just tell me a little bit more about that?
Sure, and it is the topic of the day, right? And like you said, I don't think anybody has it completely right, but one of the interesting things I think about Aon is we have a human capital consulting business which actually does this for clients. And so we're able to get, I think, the cutting edge best thinking. But we've learned a lot, and I think one of the neat things also is that we've been trying to learn and adapt as we go. And so we've been experimenting different ways, and there's some early learnings that we're finding. Certainly on the technology front, our ability to connect the 50,000 colleagues around the world has been fantastic. I can go on a WebEx video, and I can talk to people everywhere from Vietnam to China to Sao Paulo to Dublin, and have a conversation in a way that I never could before as a leader. And I think that goes all the way down through the organization. So the ability to communicate and get messages out about the firm and where it is and where it's going, I think has been a huge advantage, and we've learned how to use the technology. I think a little bit on the downside is the human interaction part is such a valuable part of our business, whether it's experience to inexperience, whether it's the client connectivity. And I think as the further we go along with this, the more we're hearing back from our colleagues, they want more of it. And so you can do more of it without necessarily being in the office 5 days a week, to have more purposeful meetings, to have more focused reasons for being in the office. And so whether you schedule everybody on the same day, whether you do it by teams, we're trying all of that. But underlying it, I think, is a desire from our people to connect more with each other. And certainly, having sort of grown up in the firm, I know the value of that interaction together when you're problem solving and when you're talking about issues or learning about things. It does help to have that human connectivity. And so we're trying to figure out what the right balance of that is, not losing the benefits of what we learned with the technology, but maybe overlaying it with a little more human interaction because people want it. And I think it helps them in their career. It helps them build their network. It just overall a more fulfilling experience for people.
Absolutely. And if you're looking at, again, in this time of change and challenges and transformation and war and you name it, what are the big sort of business trends you're seeing out there?
I think there were a lot in play going into the pandemic. So I think what's happened in the pandemic, that's become number one. And how do you manage through it? But there's been a couple, right? There are risk issues, whether it's climate change, whether it's cybersecurity, whether it's supply chain. A lot of that was already in play pre-pandemic. And so I think that's only brought those issues, maybe what that seemed 4 or 5 years down the road, always 4 or 5 years down the road, kind of brought them to everybody's front door. And I think, how do we deal with those, not only as a business, but as a community and a society? I think those issues are here to stay for the next, until we find ways to deal with them. I also think from a people perspective, as a leader of people, you've got to look at an individual colleague more holistically. You used to work with people for 20 years and know nothing about them. You didn't know what their personal life was like. You didn't know where they grew up, and they were just work colleagues. Today, you're in their kitchen, right? When you're on a video, you see the kids walking around, the dogs, whatever was going on. You've learned more about them, which has been so interesting to me, at least. And on the other side, they've learned about me or other leaders because they've been in our kitchens and they've been in our houses. and they've gotten to know my dog or my children or what have you. So I think there's the need for business leaders today to look at individual colleagues as whole people, understanding that what they bring to work is just a part of it. And so how you lead them, how you manage them, how you train them and develop them, you really have to step back and think about all aspects of them, not just the 8 or 10 hours you've got them when they're working.
Yeah. I have to say, I think it's been one of the silver linings of this pandemic is exactly that, is that ability to see whether it's the leader or the person right at the bottom of the chain, to see them as human beings.
We joke a lot about the square on the screen. You know, if you go back pre-pandemic, there was a lot of trappings of success for in an office environment. The pomp and circumstance, the office, the whole bit. Now you have a 2x3 inch square, and you better have content. You better know. So it's forced everybody in a whole new way of leading. And I think it's been good. I actually think that part of it has been a very positive takeaway, because you're able to communicate more as a person than anything else. It's been great.
It'll be very interesting if we can hold on to some of that, and that in 10 years' time it isn't all gone.
I don't think it will be.
I
don't think it will be.
I agree. I'm optimistic as well about it. Just in that context, and you've touched on it a little bit, but you know, the future of leadership, you know, and does it have to be more human, more empathetic, and just your own views on the future of leadership, if I may?
I actually think 100% it has to be, especially in a business like ours, where we are essentially a people business providing advice and services to businesses and consumers. So the culture of the firm becomes the most important part of the firm. And a lot of the work that we've been doing around trying to tear down internal barriers, get people to work better together, trying to bring those expertise areas in risk and wealth and health together to create new products and new services, that has to be a culture of openness and transparency, and the way that we work together is different than the way we used to. That started pre-pandemic, but we tried to accelerate it all through the pandemic, because we could train in such a way that historically we couldn't, because you could talk to 1,000 or 5,000 people at a time. And so how you actually lead the people, how you train them, develop them, starts with having the right culture. And ultimately the ability to draw people into our firm who are committed to the way we want to work and the value that we want to bring to clients. That has become the most important part, I think, as we step back and think through our strategy for this year and the next 3 to 5 years. It always comes back to, do we have the right people working in the right way, focused on the right things? And if the answer to that is yes, then we know we'll be successful. And when it's no, then we have to fix.
And again, you mentioned the benefits of technology during the pandemic, but you know, to some extent, every organization is now a technology organization, particularly when you're recruiting and you name it. I presume the same would be the case for Aon. You see, you're almost a technology company now when it comes to data and risk assessment.
So, absolutely, both in how we manage ourselves and what we do on behalf of our clients. But I think there's a combination here, that having fact-based insight was gaining in momentum, for sure, going into the pandemic. And our clients wanted facts, they wanted information. They also want experience, and they want an overlay of advice as to how to interpret the data, because there's so much data in the world today. Is how do you use it? What's it for? What's it telling me? So having that blend between fact-based insight and then some experience on top of it or with it, whether it's industry experience or just experience on the topic, I think adds to a better value proposition for the client, because they can do both. And they can see the data, so they can interpret it themselves, and then you can have a thoughtful discussion on what you do with it. It ties back to our conversation about the office and how you interact with that experienced person and the next level person and the next level person. How do we make sure they're learning that experience and that insight? Because we continue to invest in data, we continue to invest in having cutting edge analytics, and we will do that. But having the team-based culture and experience that can use that information ultimately is the value proposition of the firm. And so that's why it's such an important topic for us to get right.
Yeah, it's the human part.
It's the human part.
Yeah.
It always comes back to that.
It always comes back to that, doesn't it? But again, when you're talking about data and things like that, you know, and again, we mentioned it earlier, but climate change is probably, you know, maybe
It's
the
everything.
most important issue to be facing us all. And tell me a little bit more about, you know, how important it is to Aon
Sure.
and what you're doing.
Well, if you think about where we are in the business community and what we do, there's certainly, well, first I'll talk about ourselves. So what is Aon doing for ourselves? We have done the net zero commitment. We've been working on reducing our own carbon footprint as a firm and how we do that. And we've made great progress from 2015 to 2020. And now the next step to try and get it to zero by 2030. And I think we've got a plan and we've got a path, and we'll get there. I think the more relevant, or how we make a bigger impact, is what we do for the clients that we work with and the communities and the society that we're in. In that a lot of our business, if you think about the risk business, climate change is having a huge impact today on where they invest, ultimately how the economies grow, whether it's coastline, whether it's wildfires, floods, the severity of storms, and the sort of the unpredictability of timing of them makes it hard to make good business decisions on investments. So how we create, essentially match risk to capital and try and help them essentially manage that risk as best they can, starts with analytics to understand it, but it also leads to drawing in risk capital for them to help sort of manage that as best they can, whether it's insurance companies who have a lot of this risk, as you can imagine, because of what they do to insure communities and around the world. And you know, one of the things we say a lot to ourselves is if you left them to their own devices, they would all just de-risk and then ultimately not be relevant to the conversation. So how we work with them, how we prove to them that you can ultimately take on this risk and help these clients. You have to have the facts, so you have to have the modeling and the analytics, and then you also have to have the relationships with the governments and the regulators to understand what we're all trying to do to be able to build that is hugely important. And then on the people side of our business, how we manage climate change is important, because you think about, you know, the Nigerian oil fields, those are people that work there. How do you help manage through that transition, not just the effect on sort of the planet in general, but the people that are involved in it? You can't have a just transition if you don't take care of those people as well. So bringing the risk part and the human capital part and the health part together to try and look at climate change and create ultimately mechanisms to help drive resilience, both from a business level and a human level, is really what we're focused on. And I do think it's one of the sort of proudest things that I say I do when I say I'm at Aon, is that we're working hard to try and create paths for businesses to do this transition in a way that doesn't create an unjust and bumpy transition that ultimately means we won't transition at all.
Exactly, yeah. And just in that context, that, you know, talking about a just transition, you know, the health and wealth gaps are ever more visible at the moment. And how, you know, in your view, how are we going to tackle these?
You know, it is, you kind of have to look at them together, right? And I think when you step back and think about retirement and you think about health, at least in the US market, people spend more money on health than they should, and they spend less money on retirement than they should. How do you blend those together to create, you know, products and opportunities and solutions for people to manage better how they approach their overall topic of wealth as in retirement, and how do they set themselves up for that, but also how you manage health, because health used to just be medical. It's now well-being. It's now a broader suite of concern that people, and it's more of an understanding. People are now just more educated, I think, on how you look at the whole person versus just an ailment. And so we're spending a lot of energy trying to make sure when either governments or individuals spend money on these topics, that they're actually getting the right outcome that they're after. Because as the population ages, it is so important to get the retirement aspect right, but ultimately that's kind of down the road. You need to get the overall health right too.
Yeah. So I suppose overall I want to ask you, are you optimistic about the future and the sort of the risks and challenges that are ahead of us, and about building a more human-centered world, which is what we've been talking about?
Absolutely. So I would say yes. I've always been very optimistic, so that's not a hard question for me. People keep accusing me of being sunny and 70. But listen, I think when I look at the topics that we are wrestling with to create that human-centered world around climate, around cyber, around health and wealth and all those big issues, I feel like our firm is positioned where we can actually make an impact, which ultimately drives confidence and optimism around what we're doing. And so, and it's not just us, right? We work in a community of people that are also looking at trying to solve these issues, or at least create paths for people to manage through these difficult challenges. And so I am optimistic, because I do think we are making progress. I think there's a long way to go, but I think ultimately, you know, being able to commit your professional life to these types of topics has real value, and I think it has real meaning for people, which I think helps them find value in the work that they do and how they do it and who they do it with. So all things, you put all that together, and I would say, yeah, pretty optimistic about where we are and where I think we can go.
That's good to hear. Well, listen, thank you so much for being at Future Human virtually. We'll get you to Dublin next year, maybe 2023.
I can't wait. Thank you so much.
Thanks a million.
You got it.